What in the world is this? Whoa. Hello friends, welcome back to the show. So glad to see you all once again. And if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. I think you're going to enjoy this show because we're talking about cartoons that we grew up on in the 80s and 90s. If this sounds like something that you might enjoy, then go ahead and hop below and hit the subscribe button. The like, thumbs up button is always helpful too, because today we're talking about Absolute Power, which originally aired on January 16th, 1999. Even that's 20 years ago.
It is the one true force of absolute power.
So this episode came up at kind of an appropriate time because we just recently got our first successful photo of a black hole. It's been all over the internet and really kind of a cool feat in the world of science. And black holes have always been kind of a fascination in science and certainly science fiction. And it's such a mysterious anomaly that it is no wonder it's the source of a lot of material for science fiction writers to speculate what's really going on. And actually, what we do know about black holes is pretty crazy, but this episode uses some of the science and some of the science fiction around black holes as a kind of to propel this plot and bring Jax-Ur and Mala back into the picture. But we'll talk all about that right after our 60-second Brainiac Bomb rundown of the episode. Try to give you a synopsis of the episode in 60 seconds or less to kind of keep the episode moving along. Superman is out in space investigating a black hole that Star Labs had discovered, and he sees this other ship getting pulled towards it, and he goes and saves the ship and sees an ion trail leading back to where they were from, and he takes them back there, and they're all fearful of him and scared what he's going to do, and he's trying to figure this out and discovers that Jax-Ur and Mala are now ruling that planet when they were sucked out of it by the black hole science, and they are now ruling this planet as they would rule Krypton if they had their chance. So they're trying to send Superman away, and he finds these ships that they're getting ready to launch, and he discovers that the trajectory of those ships are Earth. So he's going, okay, well then I got to stop them. He stays. They try to capture him, and through some treasonous acts of some soldiers, they're able to free themselves. They fight, and Jax-Ur and Mala get sucked into the black hole. Boom. That's how you do it. I really shouldn't brag because I think that's maybe the third time I've finished it.
Idiot.
I love this premise. Again, I'm a huge fan of science fiction and any of those kind of sci-fi plot devices. And black holes are certainly one of those. I think it's one of those. I mean, that is like quintessential science fiction. Here's something that truly exists in our universe. This anomaly that has a gravitational pull to compress everything to nothing, where light can't even escape it. Because the gravity is so strong, that actually exists in our universe. And there's a lot of speculation, and it opens up a lot of opportunities to try to play around with what is really like in there. And Interstellar is a great example of that, where they kind of utilize the black hole in part of their science fiction plot. And that's the thing that I really enjoy about science fiction, is they take a scientific fact and kind of expound on it and fill in some of the missing pieces that we have yet to discover, which is also kind of fun when we look at older science fiction when they didn't really, before we made discoveries as we have, look at some of the early stuff of speculating what the moon was like when we hadn't gone to the moon yet. And I'm sure this is another situation of this. We now have our first photo of a black hole. And I'm sure in 100 years, if people are still able to watch Superman, the animated series, this will all be obsolete because we'll know a lot more about black holes. But it's just a great fun element to incorporate into the story like that. And they use the opportunity of the black hole to kind of play with that science a little bit as a way of bringing Jax-Ur and Mala back from the Phantom Zone, and somehow they expounded on that they got pulled out of that somehow, but so they bring them back into the picture. Now, of course, Jax-Ur voiced by the incomparable Ron Perlman, which is great casting choice for him.
Those citizens you so recklessly saved were criminals.
But in the original episode, Blast from the Past, that they were featured in, Mala was voiced by Leslie Easterbrook. For whatever reason, she did not return to play Mala in this episode. However, they were able to get Sarah Douglas to speak for Mala in this, and she played Ursa in the original Superman live-action movies with Christopher Reeves.
Did you see that? Did you see what I did? I have powers beyond reason.
Which I thought was just honestly brilliant casting, because this character is a little modeled after Ursa, a powerful Kryptonian villainess that is now trying to rule the planets like Earth that she's on, and sees herself more of a god than a powerful helper as Superman does. So what a great casting choice. And it makes me think, I don't know if it feels like she would have been the obvious choice initially. I mean, look at Harley Quinn, that they have Arlene Sorkin playing Harley Quinn, which is where Harley Quinn was kind of modeled after. So it seems like that would have been the obvious choice to go after her first. And maybe she wasn't available when they did Blast from the Past, and now her schedule opened up. So they were like going, oh, well, let's get her now. And it's a pretty seamless transition. I think it's been enough time since we saw Blast from the Past that it doesn't feel disjointed to go, oh, it's a totally different actress. And I think even their voices are fairly similar.
Even on your world, you don't interfere with that, do you?
So I thought it was kind of interesting how this episode was set up. We have Superman out in space investigating this black hole, and he's narrating it. He's doing a voiceover of the entire episode, much like the late Mr. Kent, which was, obviously he was voicing over that because he was telling the story as from the past. He was telling the story had already happened. He's now in the future, present for him, but future for us when we're seeing it. And he's telling the story back from when it already happened, and you get the point. But this episode, I didn't quite understand why he needed to be telling the story in past tense. It feels like it could have been developing presently. And I believe that's the only 2 episodes where Superman narrates the goings on. And I feel like it made sense in the late Mr. Kent, and it didn't in this one, in the sense that when it started, I go, oh, this is an interesting choice. It caught my attention that they made that choice. By the end of the episode, I went, why was he narrating it? It wasn't bad. It was just an interesting choice.
Satea's people were grateful for my help. I wondered if it wasn't I who should be grateful.
And then within this episode in past tense, then we go to Mala, who then tells a further flashback story about how they got out of the Phantom Zone, which again was a little rocky in how they created some of the science that I thought. The black hole tore a rift in the Phantom Zone? Maybe I don't know enough about the Phantom Zone, but my interpretation was that's like an alternate dimension place that they're sent to, the void of out of the universe. So like out of the black hole. But again, I mean, it's science fiction, so they can kind of play around with that. But again, it felt like they needed to explain how they brought these characters back, and yet it was a flashback within a flashback almost. And then we cut to another sequence where Jax-Ur is explaining how they're ruling this planet and how it's much better for them. And even that, although it was kind of told in real time, it felt a little bit more like a flashback in the sense that they kind of show these sort of montage-y shots of all the citizens of the planet working for them and that. So again, it was just like a lot of exposition that had to get out in this episode to justify it. I do like in this episode that they established a point in the Superman universe that is not talked about a lot and wasn't talked about a lot up until maybe the Man of Steel movie, when they established how much damage that Superman causes when he's fighting. He's so powerful, he's so strong, and throwing things around, and the eye blasting and breath of cold and all that sort of thing, that he really does a number on the location of wherever he's fighting. And he mentions that to them when they're asking him to protect them and stop Jax-Ur and Mala, and especially because they are also super strength people, Kryptonians, that he says,
Your planet will be the loser. A battle between us would cause more destruction and bloodshed than all the wars that came before.
And I think that's one of those elements that's just not discussed a lot. I know it was kind of a major plot point of Man of Steel, or maybe it was Batman versus Superman when they finally got into that when Superman and General Zod were fighting, that it does a number on the city and a lot of damage. And thank you for saving us, Superman. But wow, you really, now we got a lot of buildings we got to rebuild. And they kind of glaze over that sometimes, but I like that it was actually acknowledged and mentioned in this episode. I do think what this episode does well, even though some of the science is a little shaky, that it builds really well. It starts out where Superman is out in space investigating this black hole, which leads to this ship that is getting sucked into the hole. He saves that ship, which leads him back to this planet, which reveals Jax-Ur and Mala. I mean, sure, it took a lot of coincidences to get to that point, but I thought it was a great kind of stepping stone, building block elements of the story, that one thing logically led to the other, and it wasn't just random things happening at random times. All of this that was happening with Jax-Ur and Mala would have been happening regardless of whether Superman showed up or not. And it was only because he happened to be there and saw the ship getting sucked in that led him to that planet to be able to stop them preemptively from attacking Earth, which they could have just as easily done in the episode where he's on Earth, they come in and attack, he fights them, he stops them. Success, we all celebrate Superman, but then look at how much he destroyed Metropolis. But I thought they took a different angle with this, which I appreciated, and that gave an opportunity to have this entire episode take place off Earth. We don't actually see, other than that aerial or spatial, the view of Earth from space, we don't even see Earth in this entire episode or hear anybody from Earth or anything like that.
Earth.
So when it comes time to rank this episode, this was a bit of a challenge for me because it has some great elements and I appreciate how this story was constructed. And I like the science fiction elements with the black hole and those components coming in there. There wasn't anything that really stood out about this episode that kind of pushed it up the list further. So as I started kind of trying to figure out where it was placed in my ranking, it started to fall further and further down the list. And honestly, it kind of ended up in the middle section at the number 25 spot of my favorite episodes so far. I was kind of surprised that it fell that far down on the list myself, but as I would compare it to the other items on the list, there wasn't enough that made it beat out that chunk of episodes at the top of my list. I have it falling just below Hand of Fate because, again, that standout of that episode was having Dr. Fate involved in there and that partnership with them and Superman needing to go to Dr. Fate to stop Karkle, I think his name was, that Superman needed that help and it was a great partnership, and seeing Superman going up against the mystical that was kind of out of his forte and needing Dr. Fate. And like I said, that was enough hook for that episode to kind of bump that up above this one. So I have this one just beating out Warrior Queen because that was, again, another one of those episodes that some neat elements to it, but it just kind of fell flat for me. There wasn't enough dynamic. I thought the Warrior Queen character wasn't as compelling as Dr. Fate or some of the other characters that they've introduced into the episode. I think this episode, with the difference of the way that they told this story, was more engaging and more compelling than with the Warrior Queen. So I mentioned it earlier, but what did you think of the narration that was offered in this episode as a storytelling technique to have Superman narrating it? Did it seem like it was necessary for you to watch this episode, or did it sort of get in the way or perk up your attention to go, oh, is there a reason why he's narrating this in past tense? Or were you like me that felt that there needed to be some sort of justification for why he was narrating this in the past tense? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button. If you want to see more episodes just like this, well, not just like it, similar to this, then hit subscribe because I have new episodes coming out every Tuesday and Thursday, and you don't want to miss a single one, like the next episode we have coming up, In Brightest Day. I wonder who's in that one. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm Andy Knode. I'll see you soon.